Okay, so like we're official guys, we're on the mark here. Um, Welcome to the an Edtech Solutions webinar, another one that I'm sure you're being swamped with a lot of this stuff, but we all know that more information is more valuable than little information. So going to show a couple of things of our products that we're doing EdTech wise towards the end of the show. But I do want to talk with, Yamaha's doing some pretty interesting stuff. So we'll start off with Daniel Clayman from Yamaha. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Daniel. Do all your spiel, and we'll pop around and do some talking with folks.
Terrific. So my name is Daniel Clayman. I'm a senior field engineer for applications and systems for Yamaha Unified Communications. So we are a division of Yamaha Music for the USA. A little bit different than the pro side with the mixing boards and things like that. But I am talking to you today on a Video 360 1C as my main camera. I have in this room that I'm in, just so you have a reference, this is about 15 feet long by about 13 feet wide. It is all cement walls with a slate floor. So this should be super reverberant, but it should sound pretty good with the Edtech system that I'm talking to you on. So this is just the gear, the only gear. It's just a network switch that is made by Yamaha. Yamaha is the Cisco of Japan, does video and audio requirements for the transmission. These are Dante PoE switches. And then the controller above that has XLR inputs so that I can do voice lift, and that goes to the far end as well. The RMCR recognizes the Dante products in the network and then auto configures them. It tunes the room for you. You do not have to program that yourself. So I'll just show you up here above me is the RMCG. That is the ceiling microphone. And then let's see here if I can get back to here. This is my second position, a pub table. So this is more of a lounge studio office environment. I'm using the TTs, the tabletop mics, which are new to the Edtech system, also in this room. But let me show you a real quick video. It's about 4 minutes long. That gives you an overview of what the Edtech system is. I'm going to shift back to my Video 360, and then I'm going to share. Oh, can you?
Yeah, I think I need to do that for you. Hang on a second. All right.
Okay.
So the Edtech, Daniel, what do you think is the prime application in the education world for the Edtech?
So I like, we're doing a fairly large project at Florida State University right now. So anything from the lecture halls or the assembly rooms with the stadium seating or even the low stadium seating, what we've been doing is putting two ceiling mics in for students. So that they are heard and that the far end can hear them. And then we're going right into the front of the RMCR with a voice lift podium mic. So that is, we're doing them in everything from, higher ed down to K through 12 stuff. So I just finished some designs for the Hawaii Education District, and I'm really sad that the pandemic is on because I could have went there and done those specs in person. Anyway, so here is an overview of the Edtech in an open space. This is a motorcycle shop in Austin, Texas.
Hi, my name is Tim Mankey, and I'm a field systems engineer with Yamaha Communications. And today I'd like to go over briefly with you the new Edtech system. In fact, I'm talking to you on it now in my 30 by 50 workspace slash home office garage here in Austin, Texas. Let's take a quick look at the components because the Edtech system is truly game-changing in that everything is powered over an Ethernet PoE plus switch. It's truly plug and play. It's auto configuration, auto discovery. All of the routing and audio streams are set up automatically using Dante on the back end, as well as having a very elegant input-output device to interface with USB, codecs, and many other interfaces as well, including Bluetooth and SIP. So you plug everything together using Cat5 cables, and then you open up a quick GUI and you walk through a 5-step process where it's going to play pink noise, automatically tuned for this room and this environment. There is absolutely no configuration for the microphone or the system beyond that. It will literally pick up beautifully anybody in this area up to about a 25-foot space if you mount it at about a 9-10-foot height in a typical drop ceiling like we see here. So I'm going to show you it here in my environment right now. Here is the microphone above my head. It is fully interoperable too. I'm recording this with Zoom, and I'm going to go ahead and mute, and you'll be able to notice the LED turn red and pulse slowly as I mute it. And we have that interoperability with just about every platform. We will be certified with Zoom and Teams as quick as we can, but again, know that this is fully compatible with those platforms and every other one right now as well. And check this out. That's the entire system over here in my rack unit to my left. I've thrown a couple of Matchbox cars up in here just to give you some frame of reference. This is actually one U high for each unit and half a rack U wide. There's your Bluetooth pairing button. We also have some XLR inputs, so you can do some local sound reinforcement and town hall meetings within the room as well. So now let's pan out and take a quick look, and hello, here I am in this environment. And as you can see, I'm sitting underneath the Edtech microphone right now. And as I said, the equipment is in a rack over to my left. So I've set up this temporary area in my workshop. And for reference, this door behind me is 14 feet by 14 feet. The walls are 16 feet by 16 feet. And with the Edtech mic, it's got a dynamic beam locked onto me. And any other participant in the room who starts to speak up and participate in the conference would get their own beam on them as well. And the beauty of this is we have other technologies like de-reverberation, automatic gain control, and speaker tracking. So I can actually get up and move around this room, and this beam's going to stay locked onto me as I move around. I may be presenting in this area or getting around and looking at some blueprints or whatever reason I'm moving around the room. I may want to sit down in this location right here, and I've measured this. I'm now 12 feet from the microphone from right here. I'm using a fisheye lens, so it may look a little odd for those distances, but here's an example of the automatic gain control. I'm now going to start to talk very, very quietly. In fact, I'm going to whisper. I am literally 12 feet away from this microphone, whispering. And now I'm going to slowly bring my voice back up to normal level, to a normal speaking level. And you'll see that was an example of the gain control. Now, the speakers themselves are very elegant. They're 2 inches by 4 inches by 44 inches. And they do mount flush on the wall, so they're fully ADA compliant. But again, 16-inch-and-a-half drivers with amplifier section built in, and everything powered from a single Cat5 cable. Phenomenal. What's interesting is these speakers are only 9 dB down at 40 feet away. So I can have a comfortable listening level in this entire environment without blowing anyone away. I never would have thought of line array speakers until Yamaha introduced the VXLs for conferencing. So I'm going to back up now to about 17 feet away where my fridge is. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and open the door and step outside. The beam is still locked onto me and tracking me. So now I'm literally outside my shop. And now I'm going to whisper. So I'm literally outside whispering. And it's picking me up perfectly. So I should be able to now bring my voice back up and step into the building and walk pretty much anywhere in this shop and be heard very, very well. So that's an example of the Edtech system in a live environment. If you'd like to know more about this system, variations on the theme, and other systems like this from Yamaha, please visit us at uc.yamaha.com. Thank you very, very much. Have a
So that is an example of a large space, not as reverberant as the room I'm in. So you can maybe hear a little bit of the difference with the cement walls that I'm talking to you on in my Odessia space. So that brings me to 10:15. We're almost at 10:15 since there's four of us. I think maybe I should turn it over to somebody else, or we can ask some questions now, or I can get in drill into
Well,
more
let's
detail.
let's let's kind of do kind of a roundabout here, and then we'll come back around and just do a little of the roundtable discussion that we'd like.
Terrific.
John,
Yes.
you have a lot of experience. That not age experience, but just experience. And what do you feel about that, Odessia? I really like the way that the gain control seemed to work very, very well. It seemed like a pretty good product for the application. What do you see at CSU Monterey and other facilities that you're working with, where Odessia might work, or other products that you think of that are kind of cutting edge for today?
Well, we've gone through an interesting year, and I think it's going to be even more interesting year in the education space as we start getting back into schools to whatever the next new normal will be. But we'll still have the sort of hybrid events of remote learning and teaching and face-to-face learning and teaching, and then how those get combined. And the thing that most impressed me was how clear the audio was in that large room. And Daniel, in your room, it is a little echoey, but in that big space, it was amazing. So it's the right tool in the right space. But what I've been doing when helping people is sort of a model. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but SAVLB, standing for space, audio, video, lighting, and bandwidth. And these are the challenges we have. And typically you don't have a choice of the space, but you have to figure out what the space is and what you'll do with it. Where's the best location? Do you have hard walls? Do you need to put carpets on it? If you have a big sort of shop like we saw in that demo, that was amazing to get that quality of audio without a lot of audio treatment. So, but there are things you could do in spaces to help them, but it's amazing how that technology sort of took care of that echo and the things that you normally would have to do acoustic treatment. But audio is, and I think it's good that we started, Daniel. Audio is the most important part of any of our distance learning, but are also our face-to-face. It's amazing how some of the schools were resistant to adding audio amplification into a classroom. And now that I'm a senior citizen and I have hearing aids, I'm more sensitive to that. But it turns out, just like ramp cuts in sidewalks, audio amplification helps everybody. Even if a student doesn't have hearing loss, they might have an attention deficit loss, and the clearer and better audio in the room will help. And basically for everyone, the clearer the audio is and the louder it is around the ambient noise, the better off you are. And then obviously, Dan, we'll talk to you about video, but video requires lighting. And then probably the last but not least, but the biggest challenge that we have is bandwidth. And I think Daniel sort of, opened up that can of worms in that everything is being hooked up through the Ethernet. So we used to think, well, gee, my bandwidth is just going to be used with me doing my video conference in or out, or getting my YouTube videos. But now we're going to be using that bandwidth within our location, possibly running our video over it, our audio over it, controlling our lights. Who knows? Everything but the kitchen sink is being thrown into the Ethernet. So, this sort of model that I've been trying to help schools that are making these transitions are look at the space, the audio, the video, the lighting, and the bandwidth. And as a country, we're going to have to look at the bandwidth in general in terms of getting adequate bandwidth for everyone, because there's a real equity issue around bandwidth and students and teachers right now. So I'll pass it back to you, Dan. Perfect muting.
My audio. Hey, there you go. My audio works, right? So thanks, John. That was good input on, looking at what challenges we have. And that's takes us to Josh, where Josh is the guy that people walk up to him with a pile of problems and drop him on his lap and say, can you make this pile of stuff here into something that I can use? I think it would be the right guy to talk to now after we figured out this sound and the audio and the video and all this all these little pieces. Now they drop into Josh's lap, and what are you going to do with it, Josh?
Well, that's funny that you mentioned that way. We joke among our team here that, that is what, it seems like we do from time to time. One of the things I've, really noticed, I think, what we've heard so far is spot on from what we've heard from different people in the market is education's going to look a little differently now. And, I don't have a crystal ball to look into, but a few years ago, there was a large higher ed institution, not in Florida, in another state, but they were really ahead of their time because they had started thinking about remote professors. They weren't thinking about a pandemic. They were just thinking about there's a really good professor that's part of our system that's 50 miles that way. And we would like to be able for more students to have access to this professor. Or, vice versa. There's some good students there that we would like to have access to. So being able to have either remote teachers or remote students was something that they started addressing about 4 years ago. And I think, just following the way last year went, they were well equipped to address this. But part of that was because, like what Daniel showed in his video and what Dan, has done with the video side, when you combine really good tools from both of those, the engagement's much better. And John brought up some good points just about attention span. Clear audio is one of the biggest detractors to losing someone and engaging with someone. Part of what we found in the education space over the last year, audio is critical. If you can't hear, you can't communicate at all. If a student can't see, it's very difficult for their mind to not wander. So both of those elements become critical, especially as you delve into the K-12 space. And that's where we have to really be careful in what we provide, because yes, there are budget constraints. And as John mentioned, there's sort of a being just and being equitable to being able to provide things not just to the schools that have a lot of money available, but providing something solid that all students can be able to enjoy, so that we don't have a 2-year window that we're looking at here of students really getting behind, and being able to allow them to stay current. There's a myriad of ways, but then from my perspective as a AV engineer, I think of what can I address. Being with a distributor, I've got other guys on my team. I've got the network guys, the network security guys that we can talk together about making ways to make this work nice. One of the fun exercises we joke about, I sit right, when we're in the office, I sit right next to our top network security person, and making the AV system work with network security, those are usually at odds. It's usually you get the list of, I want these 40 IPs open, and they say no. And then you try a different conversation. And so it was fun watching Bill and I sort of work through that together and figure out what he really needed, what I really needed, and then being able to share that with a lot of our customers and understanding who the customer is you're talking to, because a higher ed solution with a larger room is usually a bigger piece of it. In those lecture halls, you have to address those differently. It's a different camera. It's a different set of audio gear. K-12, it's another thing. And then the other element that you're looking at is who is using it. My goal, as I'm designing systems, and this it's especially important in education to me, because my goal whenever I'm designing something is I don't want the teacher to get hung up on what I designed. I want a teacher to be a teacher, because they're good at teaching. That's a skill that I don't necessarily have, but I very much appreciate. I have a 5 and an 8-year-old, so I see when you see a good teacher in a classroom, it's a beautiful thing. Them being able to communicate and hold students' attention, like not all people are gifted with, but allowing them to do what they're gifted at and put, technology in place that's simple for them to use, but is still effective for if a student is sick, if a student has to quarantine for a few weeks, and just let them, quarantine, but not get behind. That, I think, is something that, as technologists, we can really think about and, try to put things in place and design systems that can be scaled, to the size of the space, to the size of the budget, to try to achieve better education overall.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. That brings me to, something that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and that's it's not the higher ed guys that are needing as much help, because they have some
We figured a lot of that out.
they got that stuff kind of figured out. I think we've been helping them out for quite a long time too. And even the secondary, even the 6 through 12, they're starting to understand how the technology is going to work in the classroom. What's really key to me, I think, is the K-5. It's those first years of students where you have a lot of hand time with, each one of those students needs a lot of in the face teacher time. But it also, to me, it's really important that we help those K-5 instructors become better digital instructors. And we can help those K-5 students become better digital students. And I think once we've done that, once we can start creating some good digital students, good digital instructors, that'll carry on up the path. John and I have had this discussion a few times, and this is something that I'm a little bit passionate about. My sister's an extremely good K-5 instructor, and I talk to her about this a lot. And this is something that's kind of a passion thing for me. Is let's help these K-5 students, K-5 instructors. Let's help them out a little bit in getting equipment that is easy to use, that they don't have to think about, and that can augment the lessons that they're trying to do right now. That to me, that's just my personal number one thing.
I think that was the big challenge when COVID hit, because we really didn't move to online or remote learning or what would be the knowledge that we knew about how to do this. But it was we have no choice, and people were thrown into it. In higher ed, we've had a trend that most students engaged in higher ed had maybe one or maybe 2 or 3 more online experiences. They already had course management systems, Blackboard, Moodle, Desire to Learn. They may not have used them as effectively, but this was not something totally new. It still was sort of shovelware. They said, you're face to face, now jump into this. But in the K-12 space, and particularly in the lower grade levels, this was really just a major change. And I think that's one of the fears, that we're going to have little kids think this is what distance education is. We really need to, let them know this was an emergency, because there are a lot of good things that you can do with that population. The California State Parks has a project called PORTS, Parks Online Resources for Students and Teachers. And when the pandemic hit and there were a lot of kids at home, they did the PORTS at home. So they had rangers that used puppets. They'd been doing electronic field trips for over 14 years. So they knew how to remotely engage the lower grade levels, because that's they've been working with. And so those were very successful. Over 120,000 kids in California went to them, but they were very different than the teacher who had never used Zoom and had a 4-year-old or an 8-year-old looking at the iPad going, well, why can't I play, Candy, whatever it was, versus sitting there listening to this person trying to figure out how to operate it. And I think, Josh, to your point, you're saying is that the Zoom fatigue that we have I don't think it's really Zoom fatigue. There's that article that was a researcher at Stanford, but the public press picked it up, but it really wasn't solid research. They were predicting, looking at yourself is hard because you don't want to stare that closely. And they had all sorts of other things they talked about. But to me, the fatigue is bad audio and blurry video, and you get tired of that. But since the pandemic, I've been on one group called Office Hours that's been meeting daily since the start of this, from anywhere to 2 to 6 hours, and we aren't fatigued. We're actually engaged after it.
Yeah, throughout the pandemic, education exploded, as you said, because we had to. And we put together also, besides the Decia, which is a no-touch situation because the ceiling mic is in there, and then you can have like a podium mic that you wouldn't touch either. The other big seller or mover, and it was mostly in K through 12, more than higher ed, was our little HD dual system with a little personal wireless mic. That can be the teacher's own personal mic. They could go home, they could bring it back to the classroom, came with a little USB kit, plug and play, and away they went. And that was really hard to keep on the shelves. And they would always say, what kind of cameras do you have? Well, we have a strategic partner with Video 360. Let's look at that. So just a huge application in the education markets. Yeah.
And that does bring us around a little bit to cameras, and that I know that there's been a lot of hints and tips about we're coming out with a new product, and we are. We've got a new product that'll be out in about 2 weeks from now. We're going to do the hard launch, our official launch. There'll be a webinar. They'll follow this one with our social people will follow this one with a link to the next webinar, and it'll be on May 4th. May the 4th be with you all. We're going to be launching our Navigator and Trident series of AI cameras. Now, when I'm talking about AI cameras, we're using the market AI. Really, it's computer vision, machine learning type of products. But the Trident unit looks like this. Quick, take your pictures now, take your screenshots. That's what it looks like. It's got a speaker and the beamforming microphones in it, so it's an all-in-one bar system. Also has this type of tracking solution in it. Now, what I'm going to show you here is not the same video that we're going to be using. We changed sensors, but it does have this type of tracking capabilities. So when I say tracking, I mean that it's framing me and following me around, and it's doing it in real time. So there's a lot of other what they call AI cameras out there that do auto framing and that can actually track you a little bit, but there's some delays, and so they don't really work for tracking. But this one's a little different. So I can get up and I can walk around, and you notice that the camera it really does follow me around very well. One of the other things we've done is we've made it so it does gesture controls. So it'll ease open a little bit to either side as I make gestures. So if I'm gesturing to a whiteboard, it's going to encompass that whiteboard. Now, what you may notice is just how quick this is for doing this. I don't even have to be facing the camera for it to track me. It just follows me around. Now think about this in a distance education platform where I'm a teacher in a classroom and I'm moving around and I'm doing this. I don't have to worry about where my camera's pointing. The students are going to be engaged because the camera's going to follow me around. The cool thing about it is the camera's that big. That's the size of this camera. So the world's smallest tracking solution camera. There you go. That's what we'll call it. And there you go.
Well, you combine if Dan and Daniel combine your closets there, we've got a pretty amazing device there to be able to follow that easily and have the audio focus on it. And I think this is going to make a big difference in in teaching, just because a lot of the challenges we had on our campus, I'm technically retired, failing it. But I was working with the active duty faculty members, and we had a sort of support group, and faculty members aren't used to sitting in a chair at a location staring at a camera all day long. And so just even being able to stand up, we had them do that, but they were still sort of locked in place. So having a camera like that, where if your home office, you could have that freedom of movement. And we were looking at wireless microphones, because once you start moving, you start getting that room effect. But if you can eliminate that, you've got a perfect system there. Tracking that looks smooth and natural, and audio that is focused wherever you are in the room. Plus, I assume, Daniel, that it picks up students. We just had one person there, but I assumed if you'd had a couple people in that room, it would have done the switching and beam focusing to other speakers in the room.
That's right. There are 64 miniature microphones in the RMCG, and it has 4. So what kind of sets us apart is that we have AI algorithms in these 2 that you have a virtual personal beam. So we have really narrow beams that focus on human voice, and that algorithm is called human voice activity detection. The tuning part of this is very similar to if you've had a Yamaha theater system in your home. They will give you a microphone, you sit in your favorite chair, and it tunes it for that experience. Adesia does the same thing. And they're even on our YouTube channel. We have 4 people doing the days of the week, the months of the year, things like that. And you can hear everybody speaking at once clearly. Now, whether your brain can pick up and understand everything that somebody is saying when 4 people are talking at once, that's a different story. That's just a really boisterous meeting where you're confused, well, who said what? But very clearly locks on, and you can hear all of those at once. So the kind of A, B, C, D, it's a good video, because you can clearly hear everybody talking at once. But in most cases, in education or in corporate meetings, that just doesn't happen. That's an argument or something like that.
Well, I worry about how sensitive that beam is. I was thinking if we had a faculty meeting, it was before lunch, you get a lot of stomach growling. I mean, I was picking up the whispers, but I guess that's not considered human voice.
No.
That's human activity.
Activity, that's it.
Yeah.
So one of the things I really like, Dan, with the camera, and I believe, you and I had talked about this before, but it just really allows a teacher to teach in their own style. You got to address, John mentioned it, most teachers aren't used to just sitting in front of a camera and just talking, especially when you get to the K-12 space. Like, what K-12 teacher just looks in one spot and always talks to one spot? They have that gift of looking and sort of absorbing everything in the room all at once. Your camera really allows them to interact naturally without having to concern themselves with the technology. They're able to teach, they're able to focus on the students and be themselves, and allow that personality that does, that is that gift for them to come out without them having to worry about the technology or putting themselves in the box that they need to be in.
Or walk slower so that the camera can keep up. That was really
actually,
impressive.
if I had the space in here, you could actually run and the camera keeps up with you.
That was very impressive.
Dan, I have a question though. Is it actually, this is your 1C, is it actually this size?
Believe it or not, John, it's actually 2 millimeters shorter.
Yeah, because this is one of your earlier cameras, and in some of our setups when we were working with our teachers, particularly if they were able to instruct from their classroom or even from a home where they had a large screen TV, whatever camera you have, and I have this challenge here to make sure I'm looking straight at the camera and not, up there. And what I liked about the 1C is that I was able to work with some faculty members where they had their beautiful 55 or 65-inch TV, and we stuck this on a tripod with a small pole going up, and the camera was dead center in the middle of that screen. but it was small enough that it really didn't affect the view of the gallery. But when they were looking straight into the camera. And that, I think, made a big
Nice.
difference in how they connected with their students. So the fact that you have a camera that's this size that will track, I'm ready.
Well,
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah, and Dan, if you want to
Really
test
cool.
your system in the home, I've got one I'd like to try it on. So
Yeah, I think you might be able to help us out with some beta testing.
the USB hub, I kind of have a quick testimonial here too.
Oh
You know,
yeah, that's a pretty cool feature.
during the pandemic, I had my daughter and her boyfriend were staying with me for a few months, and he was doing his online. He's finishing at Laguna School of Design for Fine Arts, and he had a couple cameras set up, and he needed a camera on his easel, and he saw me using the Video 360 with the hub on it, and he was like, "How are you doing that? So switching around so fast." And I go, "Oh, I have another camera plugged into the back of the Video 360." And so I let him borrow it for one of his sessions, and he ordered one right after he was done with that. Loved it. Yeah.
I put that in there because I had it at the time when I was doing some of the design. I was using a Microsoft Surface with the single USB port, and it drove me nuts. That now I got to throw a hub in my bag along with the camera and a microphone, because laptop cameras and microphones. So that's where the hub came.
well, the other thing, now if we're going to praise your design, one of the best things with this camera, and people would first give me a little bit of grief. They say, well, it doesn't have a microphone built in. And I said, yeah, but it has a USB port. And more importantly, most microphones and most cameras are like most speakers used to be in big TVs. They weren't designed for great audio. So the fact that this didn't have a microphone, let me say, now we've got the best camera and we could put it in a location where you could look at it. Now let's focus on the audio, back to that little model that I, talked about, starting with, the space and then going to audio and then going to video is the automatic way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it turned out fine. The Navigator AI, which is the same basic form factor, doesn't have the USB port on the back of it though. Believe me.
That's why it's skinnier.
Yeah, it's a little less. It's 2 millimeters deep, less deep, 2 millimeters shallower. But it does have a USB-C port on the back of it, and that was here. I can share this. Let me do this real quick. So there you go. That's what the Nav AI looks like. Little guy, USB-C
Cool.
port on the back. And this is the Trident. And pretty simple. I'm not going to do too much more. That's just teasing for May 4th. But please, everybody, by the way, if you're interested in tuning in for our May 4th announcement, you'll get a lot more demos, and we'll talk a lot more about the product itself. But, today I really want to kind of focus on, how this technology works for the educators, and having a tracking solution that works video, that tracks that easily. And believe it or not, that camera is going to hit the market at $449. So, being able to have an AI camera that works so quickly that can work as a tracking camera for $450. Come on.
Well, and I think that addresses a little bit of what John talked about for that K-12 space that allows me as a designer to be able to pair something that I believe in from the video side that I've seen work, seen the functionality of it that works well, give them that, put a separate audio piece in that's designed to be audio. Whether it's they want to be, a headset. Most teachers don't want to wear a headset all day, and I don't blame them. If they're going to be hours and hours and hours, they probably want something to just talk to. So, the ability to put the two together And then whatever, if it's a smart board school, if it's a Promethean school, if it's, ViewSonic, what have you, pick your flavor of display. It can all be totally separate from that, and allows me to be very modular with whatever flavor that particular district wants or that district can afford. It's already gotten me in a good position to be able to offer this as a really solid solution.
Yeah, I think that, if we were to made up, two state-of-the-art products for education, it would be the Navigator and Edtech. I mean, I think for a combination for an active classroom that would work easily in solo instruction or in a hybrid environment or in a full classroom environment, I think we have the right products now. Be able to bring these products together, bring a package together that can really be effective. That is kind of the point of what we're trying to do today. Is we're talking about what makes for a good, effective EdTech product. And John's input on addressing each one of the challenges individually, I think, is key. Really is. Pardon my sniffles. The trees are just going nuts up here. Anyway, yeah. So the Edtech in the classroom, the Navigator in the classroom. We've got that kind of figured out. But again, I think there's a lot of emphasis needs to be made on making better digital instructors and better digital students because of that. We need to be thinking about not this pandemic, but the next one. And, unfortunately, with the way the world is today, we'll probably see something else like this happen again. So by setting our expectations now of how we will do it, I think, we all survived this last one. Well, most of us did. And I think, as we move forward now, we're going to have some education on what we can do to ameliorate the challenges for the next time. And overall make a better learning environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that the technology becomes transparent. At the very beginning of this, there was a challenge of getting hotspots to students, getting computers to students. There was a lot of discussion of, just how do we get people connected, for lack of a better term. But if you're dealing with that, you're not dealing with the real issues of how do you have to modify the instructional design? How do you handle the special needs of students? How do you help faculty create engaging experience, flip classrooms and the like? So I don't think we're going to go back to a normal, whatever normal was. And I think one of the things that we learned that it's not only teaching that we do at school, it's all that social engagement and all the extracurricular activities and the community involvement. And so those things, I think, because of the hybrid, we're going to see the schools reaching back out to their community, even if we're back to full face-to-face for instruction. But for that to work, the hardware has to be there. That sort of model, the space, the audio, the sound, and bandwidth, those things all have to be resolved. But we're getting closer to having better technology solutions for schools and universities. The schools and universities were not an expensive vertical market compared to enterprise communication systems and business facilities. So whatever worked in business is what we moved into education. I think now you're seeing tools, hardwares, solutions that are really focused on the needs of elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and colleges. So I think if there was a silver lining out of this experience is that we are using technology to help improve access that we didn't before. And when people talk about how quickly this happened, one of the advantages of having gray beard is it took about 15 to 20 years for the overhead projector to move from bowling alleys to being used in classrooms. So that the fact that we've made this transition to this technology in a year for the majority of our students and teachers is a pretty earth-shattering change in behavior.
Yeah, it definitely accelerated the curve. That piece, there's a lot of things you could sort of see starting to come. And I think we did about a 10-year jump in the adaptation cycle over the past year just because of it. But I think students are going to be better off for it, because you think about students that may have had, an autoimmune disorder, or for some reason missed a significant portion of time. Now, hopefully we have better tools in place for them to not miss as much time, and still have more classrooms available and classes available for them to participate in more fully, and not feel like they missed as much. And so when they are back in person with their other classmates, they don't feel as disconnected as they may have once felt.
Yeah. I guess the worry I have, though, is that, the supply chain was pretty rough at the beginning of the pandemic. And now that we're feeling a little more comfortable with the vaccines being rolled out, California hopes to be back to whatever normal is in June. I'm not sure the supply chain and a manufacturing chain is going to keep up with it. Sort of what both Dan and Daniels, our two Dans, it's pretty amazing for the product development, from concept to product, how quickly you've moved things. But I assume that eventually, if this takes off, there aren't going to be enough chips around. I mean, that seems to be the fear that I hear people talking about
right now. It's a serious issue.
It is.
We, obviously we were able to anticipate some of that. That's why we do have cameras in stock, but it's because we invested heavily in chips. But that doesn't mean that, after we run through this stock of chips, which we will, that we're not going to have problems getting more. And that is a serious concern right now. I don't know what, I don't own a chip fab, so.
Well, in estimating what that flow is, because prior to the pandemic, sure, we had things like the YVC 330 that we made for open spaces that you could, do kind of a cone of silence around that. We had the HD dual stuff that's always been huge in the marketplace, or X tags, things like that. And then we started really looking at full, easy to, install and tune systems. And while we started focusing on Audencia, all of a sudden we're looking back and the X tag and the HD dual just went nuts, right? And we're like, where'd that all come from? It had just been at a kind of a steady state going along, pandemic hit, and it was hard to keep that stuff on the shelf. And so kind of looking forward, the chipsets and things like that, and really understanding what this new market space is going to look like is very critical to fulfill those needs, for sure.
Hey, Don Bailey was asking you, Josh, what's the model of your headset?
So this is the Plantronics, before it became Poly. So it's a few years out of date, but so I have to look at the exact, because I believe they changed the name on it last year. But this is, one of the Plantronics headsets, Bluetooth, USB. I always use the USB on it just because it allows me to swap devices quicker.
And it has a microphone that's built into that headset.
Yeah. This one is, for like this type of market. It's great for, I'm working at home. I have younger children, very good at canceling out other noise and picking up me, but not the boys, so, or the dog, or, any other noise that we have, wherever we are at that time. So, it's been very good for that.
Okay. That Don had popped in there with the thing on the chat. Another thing, just so you guys know, in that webinar on May the 4th, we're going to give away one of the Navigator AIs too. So just so you know. So, but you'll have to, I'll pick your name. It'll be a random pick of the name of people that were in the whole webinar. And I'm going to say a word sometime during the webinar, and that's going to be, you're going to have to respond to me with that word, so you're paying attention. So I'm trying to figure out how to do this little contest, but it'll be fair, but you gotta tune in to win,
It
right?
sounds a little bit like Groucho Marx say the magic word and the duck
Yeah.
comes down, but
That's basically.
but most of the people wouldn't even remember that show. It's only us peoples who with the
But
gray
been
hair.
around a
it's
while.
even before my time, John. So I'm not quite that old.
You really know how to hurt a guy.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that kind of hits it up there a little bit. I'd like to open it up to any of the participants that want to ask any questions. Go ahead and type them in the Q&As, and you have some pretty smart guys here, so might be a good time to get that stuff out. So let's see on the Q&A.
Looking through the attendees, we have some pretty smart people there also. So I'd love to hear whatever thoughts or concepts they have.
All right. Will the recording be available? Of course, dog. Of course. Yep. We'll do, pretty much right after these things, I'll go ahead and I'll post up a thing on LinkedIn also for the recording this. But I do think it's important for us to really think through how do we make good digital students? It's kind of a passion thing for me. I just want to make sure the stuff works. All right, let's see. I think that's about it on Q&A. So nobody really has any questions for us. All right. Yeah, there's some pretty smart people. Geez, so look at all these folks. A lot smarter than me.
Well, I think, the two demonstrations of new products today, Daniel, I don't know how old that product is that you showed, but when I was part of the opening of CSU Monterey Bay, we set up a classroom with tiered chairs and we had microphones for every two people. Never was able to tune the room.
Yeah.
It just, and I think all that cabling and all that stuff. And if that had existed back in 1995, it would have been like magic. You couldn't explain it.
Yeah, it would have been magic, absolutely, back then.
Yeah.
Edessia is brand new. We will be rolling out every 3 or 4 months a new family member into the Edessia family of products. The first two that we've announced is the ceiling mic and the tabletops. So really. We started shipping the beginning of this year with Edessia. We announced it around October, November of last year.
And that Doug Pettick asked for a link on more details for the Navigator AI camera. The camera itself will be going live, like I said, in 2 weeks, but the website will be starting to promulgate the specifications, things like that out. Probably sometime this week. We'll make it available for people to download PDFs, etc. Okay. And see, Reggie says hello, John and Dan. All right. Let's see, Brian McLaughlin. What will be the next big thing? It was Zoom and Teams this past year, making cameras and microphones more integrated in the classroom. I think more augmented reality. I see augmented reality as being kind of the next big thing in collaboration spaces, not just for education, but for work processes too. But, got some interesting things in my pipeline for that already.
Well, for me, I think we have no idea what the next big thing will be. If you go to zoom.us/blog, they announced on Monday a major fund to have entrepreneurs and designers and developers to create new products to expand, how productivity can be increased using video communication. So I think we're going to see a lot of very creative people with this sort of year experience that we have of coming up with new and different ways of using the technology. So I expect it to be, you know, cameras and microphones and getting your bandwidth was just sort of the what is it, the tail end of the hockey stick curve of innovation within this space.
Yeah, I think there's,
we're coming now.
uh,
It's come strong.
I think you're going to see a lot of, communication is the real driver, whether it's voice or video or how it's people being able to communicate with each other, be able to share ideas. And so I think Dan may be onto something with, sort of the augmented reality, because that's another tool to allow people to communicate to each other and to share ideas. And the more ways that people can do that, but that's the core component is the communication. How are people interacting and communicating with each other? However, the technology evolves, that's still going to be the core component. And so I would guess that whatever's next that's big is going to have that as the core piece that is being solved.
Yeah, it's just, it's a matter of breaking down distance barriers and, location barriers. Now we'll start, bringing the world even smaller. We'll be able to participate with a veterinarian out in the savannah of the, savannah in Africa, as they're going around talking about things and giving us a virtual tour. We'll have, students that are learning about the oceans for the first time from somebody underwater that's communicating with them and taking them on a guided tour of a sunken ship. We're going to see a lot of really interesting things coming from our industry that were just dreams before. And, like flying a helicopter on Mars.
Well, Dan, I'll give you a challenge for your next camera.
All right.
I want it to track, but I want you to be able to do, if you're familiar with e-glass, which lets the teacher write on a glass and let them see it.
Sure.
So you need to have a camera that once you move to somewhere, you could stop for a moment and click your fingers and then draw in the air and have it right on the screen.
Yeah.
Get that done by May the 4th?
That's not far away, John.
What was that, Josh? Matterport?
Oh, I just wanted to see him get that done by May the 4th.
Oh,
yeah, that's gonna be a little tough. I'm pretty fast, but I'm not that fast.
Maybe a different May the 4th.
well,
Yeah.
but I think, Dan, that goes on to the augmented reality. I mean, it would really be great if I could just point my hand and draw a circle around the Empire State Building picture that's behind Daniel. And Josh, you got a lot of good space on either side of you. I could, draw pictures or point to things.
Yeah, or we could
Dan's-
put King Kong hanging right
yeah,
here.
King Kong
There we
flying
go.
onto it.
There we go.
Hey, there's one more question here. How will the Yamaha products come to market? Through what channels? Yamaha, you see, goes through distribution. The primary suspects are ScanSource, Starin, Shoreview, Cinex, and things like that. So we go through distribution a little bit different than Yamaha Pro, which is the distribution arm for Yamaha Pro products. And always tune in to our LinkedIn stuff. Tyler Cox does some great Friday wrapped ups and Tuesday posts. So we're pretty all over social media for just jump into one of our webinars, or a good source is LinkedIn too, on our LinkedIn page for announcements.
All right, guys. Well, I think good. Not bad. We burned up an hour pretty good.
That was
All
nice.
right. Again, 2 weeks, we'll be doing another webinar, doing the official launch of the Navigator and Trident AI devices. The Navigator is going to be hitting the market at $450, $449. And then the Trident is going to be coming in at $850. So think of what you'll be able to do with tracking solution cameras at those kind of price points. So there you go. That's I don't do pitches very often on my webinar. That's a pitch. All right. And anybody else have anything to say before we bail? Well, John does, but he's muted. So
I say, well, no, that was great. Thank you for letting me be part of this, and we could stop recording and talk among ourselves if you'd like. It's whatever's up with you guys.
all right, I'll stop the recording. See ya.